Good evening, everyone. My name is Bernice Floridian, and I am going to be your host for the evening. I am so excited to be here with y'all and talk about this really important topic, which is voting rights restoration. And as y'all know, in 2018, we voted yes on Amendment 4 to restore the rights of 1.4 million people in the state of Florida. And tonight's purpose is to find out, where are we now with Amendment 4? What has been going on as it has gone through the court system? So I'd like to start by asking some of the organizations who helped put this program together to introduce themselves and share a little bit about their organization. And I'd like to start with League of Women Voters.
Hi, everyone. My name is Deb Kaufman, and I'm the president-elect of the League of Women Voters of Hillsborough County, which is a co-sponsor of this great event. I've been delegated to represent our league tonight by our president, Dr. Idalia Phillips, who was unable to be here. The League of Women Voters of Hillsborough County is part of a state and national organization whose motto is empowering voters, defending democracy. The League is a nonpartisan political organization that encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. The League here includes members throughout Hillsborough County and has an active unit in Pasco County as well. The Hillsborough County League worked energetically on behalf of Amendment 4 by making the petition to place the amendment on the ballot available for signatures at all our major events prior to 2018, and holding educational events for county residents on the importance of this constitutional change. Since the passage of Amendment 4, the League has hosted 2 lawyer education events taught by Cecile Schoon from the State League, who is part of the panel here this evening. And we have held voter registration events and education to voters in key areas of the counties that we cover. Our members also responded to calls for action from the State League to communicate with our legislators and to voice our opposition to the legislation that eventually passed, creating barriers to returning citizen voting rights. Prior to the 2020 general election, Hillsborough League members sent postcards, texts, and made phone calls to returning citizens to encourage them to exercise their right to vote and to provide information on how to do so. We continue to develop partnerships with groups like those represented here tonight, as well as others in our community, to assist and support returning citizens, encouraging them to register and to vote. We're really looking forward to this evening's discussion as a way to enhance and expand our work with you in this important effort. Thank you all for being here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Deb. Next, I would love to invite Diana Shanks from Dream Defenders.
Good evening, y'all. Thanks so much for having me on. My name is Diana Shanks. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm so happy to be here with the Dream Defenders Tampa squad. I'm the lead organizer for Tampa Dream Defenders, and I'm so grateful to be here and so grateful to watch Bernice, one of our own, host this. Dream Defenders was formed in 2012 after the murder of Trayvon Martin, and we organize around issues of racial justice and specifically police and prison abolition. We were really honored to organize around Amendment 4, and we continue to organize around full voting rights, restoration, and full rights for returning citizens. We're a chapter-based organization, and our local Tampa chapter is working a lot right now and is very proud to be leading the effort in Hillsborough on opposing House Bill 1. So please follow us and send me an email if that's something you'd like to get involved in. And I will pass it back to Bernice. Thanks so much, y'all.
Awesome. Thank you, Diana. And last but definitely not least, we have Ms. Hiba from CARE Florida.
Good evening, everybody. Bismillah. It's really a pleasure to be working with such amazing people and organizations and hosting a panel of wonderful individuals and experts who will educate us on Amendment 4. You know, we all know, my name is Hiba Rahim. We don't all know that, but my name is Hiba Rahim, and I work for the Council on American Islamic Relations in Florida. It is, CARE Florida is the state's largest Muslim civil rights and advocacy group. And as a faith-based civil rights group, we are guided by our faith in our actions. And Amendment 4 spoke very loudly to us because we're taught to counter injustice in any way that we can. We're taught to, if we see an injustice, to counter it with our hands or with our tongue or with our hearts. And we're taught that that's the weakest of faith. And when you see voting rights being stripped from individuals, from returning citizens, deliberately to disenfranchise people, to take away rights that really belong to individuals, to see that Florida is one of only 11 states left in the nation that has not returned voting rights to individuals is a grave injustice. And we are called to at least speak and educate and empower individuals, and at the very best to motivate others to stand up and speak out and take action. And that's why we're here today. And we certainly hope that this panel brings a great amount of information and motivation to continue the fight and see that we bring positive change to Florida. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, ladies, for introducing your organization. I just realized we're a group of women who organize the event. Yes, next month is Women's History Month. We'll have to do something for that too. But I would love to bring in our panelists for the evening. And I'd like to start with introducing Ms. Cecile Schoon. Cecile Schoon is the first vice president of the League of Women Voters of Florida and a past president of the Bay County League of Women Voters. In that capacity, she is the chair of the State League efforts on the restoration of rights and for healthcare. She is an attorney by profession and a longtime advocate for social justice. Welcome, Cecile. How are you doing tonight?
I'm well, and I am impressed with this group of activist women. I'm looking forward to hearing what everybody has to say.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. Alrighty. Next, we have Ms. Connie Burton. Ms. Connie Burton is a community activist and presently serves as the chairwoman of East Tampa Community Advisory Committee. Connie has a long history of organizing. If you're from Tampa, you know Ms. Connie. She organizes around issues that have a direct impact on people of color. Welcome, Ms. Connie. How are you doing tonight?
I'm just excellent and just very honored to be here because we are going to be speaking to something that is having a direct and has had a direct impact on members of our community. And Amendment 4 speaks to the heart of people having real connection to dignity through voting. So I'm happy to be here tonight.
Wonderful. And we are so grateful to have you on with us. So thank you. Lastly, I would like to introduce Neil Valls. Neil Valls serves as the Deputy Director of FRC, the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, and he has more than 25 years of experience working as a public servant and community advocate. Valls is the author of the book Into the Sun and speaks to local, state, and federal organizations about his work on Amendment 4 in Florida and the experiences that led to and followed his felony conviction. Welcome, Neil. How are you doing tonight?
I am doing fantastic, Bernice. I am doing even better knowing that a couple of my favorite people in the entire world, Cecile and Connie, are on this panel, and that we get to talk about important things that not only touch on, criminal justice reform and voting, but talk about deep issues about how we see each other as people and what humanity means in the public square. So I'm super excited and grateful to be a part of this whole process.
Wonderful. Thank you. And we are excited to have you as well. So I want to just jump right in and get us started. As we all know, this historic amendment passed in 2018 with an overwhelming majority, but it got dragged through the courts. So what is the current status of Amendment 4?
Well, I'll take a whack at that one, and I know that these other experts will join in and keep me on track. But immediately after Amendment 4 passed, we were all celebrating. I remember seeing Connie and Neil and Des. We were so tired, and we were like, "Whoo!" But immediately, people started talking, and the legislators. We've got to do some legislation and help this amendment. It doesn't really say what it needs to say. We need to add to it. And we were like, no, it's fine. It was written to just work on its own. And the governor also added his voice to it. And it turned out legislation was proposed that whole spring. And we were there testifying, and all of us were there trying to prevent some things that would have been much more damaging than what actually ended up happening. And at the very last minute, part of the bill, the bill was altered that was going to change it in a way that it had a huge impact on returning citizens, who we refer to as persons with felony convictions. We refer to them as returning citizens, so they're returning to their citizenship. And we were very, very concerned because it said in the legislation that passed, in order for you to complete your sentence, you have to pay all your financial obligations. And what had happened over time, the judges realized that people couldn't always pay the fines and fees, and they would convert it to a civil lien, which means they took it off of the criminal side of the courthouse, because there's literally two sides of a courthouse. And they took it from there, and it became a civil judgment. And what that meant is when a person finished their incarceration and probation and there was a conversion to a civil lien, they had nothing left on the criminal side. So they could say, I finished my criminal sentence. And that person could then vote under Amendment 4. The new legislation took that conversion into a civil lien away and said, we don't care if you have a conversion to a civil lien. Even though a judge has changed it from a criminal to civil, you still got to pay everything that was put in the original sentence. So that was not good, because more people would have been able to vote right away because of the conversion of a civil lien. And that just put everyone back in a big pile where they had to find out what was owed and try to pay it and all of this. And in that statute, though, and they did put something in to allow persons to go to court to modify their sentence if they can convince a court that the circumstances have changed. So that is there. Now, what happened is people were very concerned. The league was very concerned. The ACLU, Southern Poverty Law Center, we were not comfortable with the change in the law and the way it kind of constricted the opportunities under Amendment 4. That concerned us. And we were also concerned because, yes, you can go to court, but a lot of returning citizens don't have money to find a lawyer. It's like a hassle. So we wanted to put it back the way it used to be. And so we litigated, and we won at the trial level. We were in federal court. And on appeal, that was undone. So we lost on appeal. And where we are right now is back to what the legislator had passed. And that is, to be able to vote, a person needs to complete their entire sentence, including paying financial fines and fees and restitution. So that's where we are. And there's a lot of organizations, and I'll let Neil take over from here, that are trying to help people to accomplish that goal. But that
Yeah, you want me to jump in here, Cecile?
Yeah.
Thank you for that. And Bernice, great question. I think as it relates to Amendment 4, a couple things just to keep in mind. And one thing that I definitely try to bring to the conversation is encouraging folks to look at this through the perspective of the returning citizen. The person who, I wasn't able to vote for 16 years, and I know people who weren't able to vote for their entire lives because of a past felony conviction. And so what we're talking about is really sacred stuff. And at the end of the day, Florida, for the longest time, for 150 years, we've been living under an old Jim Crow law that banned people from life with past felony convictions from voting. That's done, right? So the Amendment 4 took away that lifetime voting ban, right? And what we saw happen, as Cecile outlined it in its steps, is ultimately on a certain level, the 1.4 plus million people who are impacted by Amendment 4 have now been cut in two. You've got 600,000, 700,000, 800,000 people who are eligible to vote right now. Right, we worked with so many this past year. I feel like we're in this Dickens novel, right? It's the best of times, worst of times. Right, we saw over 52,000 people who, with past felony convictions, who were unable to vote in 2018, vote last year. Right, that's something worth celebrating. Right, like the expansion of democracy in Florida that happened with Amendment 4 is the largest expansion that we've seen in 50 years in this country. That's worth celebrating. And the headwinds are real. And how wonderful would it be to have a government that would work with us to encourage and tear down barriers so that people could access democracy, rather than have a situation that we're in which there's lack of clarity and there's real challenges to try and get folks registered into the polls. But I do think it's important to talk about both sides of the coin, right? Because hope is what passed Amendment 4, and we continue to be in a moment in which hope can continue to get the hundreds of thousands of people who right now are unable to be eligible to vote because they owe financial obligations across that finish line, because that lifetime ban is gone. And so we've got work to do. We saw what we were able to do collectively with FRC, our organization, helping to lead the effort with this fines and fees program, in which we raised over almost $30 million and paid off the fines and fees for 44,000 individuals so that they could have access to democracy in the state of Florida. So I think we're seeing what's possible when we organize. It's fun to be on a call with people who understand community activism, relational organizing, that we're better and stronger together. And so that when we lock arms and continue to do what we're doing tonight, we actually can move the needle in the right direction. But I don't want to be here like cheerleading some stuff that happened that was really bad for returning citizens. I'll never forget, like Cecile was talking about, the dynamic that played out in spring and summer of last year, in which we had a federal judge make a ruling that basically said to 400,000, 500,000, 600,000 human beings in the state of Florida, you know what, when you go to bed tonight, think about how you're going to vote, because you got your freedom. You're liberated in a way that you can exercise and have your voice heard at the ballot box. And 6-7 weeks later, we saw an appeals court actually crush those dreams and say to those same hundreds of thousands of people, your voice is not going to be able to be, participate in this process. And I'm cool. I understand there's legal lawyers, and man, I'm grateful for the good lawyers who are fighting a good fight. But for the perspective of those of us who live in the community and engaged, man, those are hugs and tears and real pain and righteous anger that ultimately led to this movement, this strike of lightning, that people rallied around the idea that they're like, oh my gosh, my neighbor owes $300 or $400, I could help that person out. And operate through this fines and fees fund. So even in the struggle, we see what's amazing and what's possible when we organize and when we focus on the real lives of people. So when you talk about what's the status of Amendment 4, I feel like we've climbed a whole lot of the mountain, and we got a long way to go. But if we focus on the people and the real lives of folks who live in the community, who simply want to be treated like anybody else, when your sentence is completed, you shouldn't have to choose between putting food on your table and whether your voice matters in your community. And we rally around these values and morals that we all believe in. I think that we can keep moving things in the right direction.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And Miss Connie, I saw your head nodding a lot while Bill was talking. Is there anything you would add?
To this, I would just have to thank the leadership of FRRC. And that would be, we have a wonderful senior leadership team led by, Brother Desmond Meade, Brother Neil, and others. When we talk about blood, sweat, and tears, it's all in. It's 100% commitment. But you know what Amendment 4 did for, say, people describe them as marginalized community? Being on the ground, we saw people having a willingness to come back into political life. Knocking on those doors, starting off with the ballot initiative, just being out in the community and just speaking plain, laying out the terms to the people, connecting history, of helping this generation to understand that we don't have to talk about, what people did 50 years ago. Now this was their moment in history to step up and to watch how those that had political power use those power for the good or for the bad against the people. And we was committed to digging in. We, had to go through with people, cheering, yes, we won, and then people feeling defeat. But through all of that, our, partnership, our leaderships found ways to help people understand that what they was trying to keep from the community and the people, that we had a right to democracy. We had a right to experience that. We had a right to participate in the power of vote. And so when we stage little events to do our political education on the street, people would come up and say, you know what? I'm going to sign this ballot because I'm signing for my brother. I'm signing for my sister. I'm going to vote for someone who cannot vote. And then once we found the resources for the fines and fees, again, people started having confidence that they was not abandoned organizationally. We was structured correctly. Partners had to understand that they was being committed to the long term of democracy and justice for the liberation of people who have been denied so many years. So I am so super excited because every time we are told no in the courts, either some, political figure think that they have set us back, what they have actually did is pushed us forward, because people that we probably couldn't get to come and join the campaign has a willingness to come and join now because they understand what is being denied them.
And let me ask you, Neil, because I know that you recently had your rights restored. Can you share a little bit about what was that process like for you?
Yeah, I mean, so I always like to say that I don't know that there's a better evangelist for democracy than somebody who lost the right to vote and got it back, right? Because all those years that I didn't have an ability to have my voice heard in the community or in issues that mattered to me and my family, like I yearned for it, and I didn't feel like I was a full participant in the community. My story is not like everybody else's story, and so there's a lot of kind of like a big story to all the returning citizens in the state of Florida, who come from a variety of different places. But at the end of the day, I think that we can see something that's really powerful when we rally behind values that we all believe in. Connie mentioned Desmond Meade. Man, he is a national hero. He is an incredible leader. And I remember a conversation I had with him, right? Because I wanted Amendment 4 to pass so bad I couldn't think about anything else, right? It was like what we were talking about constantly. And I found myself in a conversation with Desmond about like politics, right? And we do everything we can to avoid this being political, right? I know, I get it. We're talking about voting, and we're talking about democracy, and we're talking about criminal justice. So that's seems naive to say, hey, we want to depoliticize this. But we really don't want this to be about politicians, right? This is actually about the people in the community and the families. And Desmond reminded me as I was kind of talking to him, I said, well, maybe we could say this that way, or we could position it that way. He's like, man, all good ideas, but bro, this is deeper than all that. He's like, this transcends partisanship. It transcends all that stuff. He's like, at the end of the day, we win on Amendment 4 if people see us as human beings. And we lose if people see us as something different. And so everywhere I go, everywhere I walk, now I'm an evangelist for democracy. And I don't mean it disrespectfully to people who have organizations that have points of view and beliefs about the right-left paradigm. And that's cool. Like, go make our country better, our local stuff better. I'm all for all that. But for us, deep down, there are people whose voice right now cannot be heard, and it should not matter what they want to say as much as it's about our democracy and our belief in the fact that humans have dignity and value and should be honored in the process. And so I got to walk that out on a personal level. And in this past election, like we said, we had over 90,000 returning citizens registered to vote after the passage of Amendment 4. Over 52,000 actually went out and voted. So a turnout of over almost 60% in a constituency in which all the experts and all the know-it-alls have told us you don't get people turning out like that. So while we understand that that isn't the 1.4 million people in its entirety, we weren't in this for one cycle. We weren't in this for one moment. We're in this for the long haul and the belief that everybody's voice matters. And we see this march taking place. And I got to see that in October and November as we went to all across the state. We had these buses, and all we did was celebrate democracy with people. You pop that bus in. I've got to hang out with Connie, so many times. I mean, you just show up, returning citizens, man, we have that little bond. We're like, man, you voted for the first time? I heard somebody I hadn't voted since JFK, right? We had a woman, Barbara, man, she registered to vote, and she brings me to tears just thinking about her story. She registered to vote, and she told our canvassers, all I want to do is have my voice heard. Right, and she had been told by her doctor she had 6 months to live, right? And here she is, she's clamoring for and telling her family she wants to go vote. Now the story doesn't end well, to be honest with you, because 4 days after she registered to vote, she passed away. But we shared her story like she was the flame that kept this whole thing going, at least from the FRC perspective, all the way through the election. It's the barbers out there. She didn't want to go meet a celebrity. She didn't want to go travel. She didn't want to go eat some nice meal. You know what she wanted to do? She wanted to vote. And her sister actually took the urn with her to go vote. And we got to celebrate with the family about 2 weeks ago in Vero Beach in Indian River County, where we were able to work with the local supervisor, and they gave Barbara a posthumous voter certificate. And to spend time with her family, like, it is hard to not see what we're talking about tonight from the perspective of real deep values and then a belief in democracy. And if you saw what happened on January 6th, and I get it, I'm going to shut up now because you get me going, I get all passionate, I'm sorry, but democracy itself is at stake in our country. And I think it's really important for those of us who are democracy activists to be for democracy itself. Like, we are for people's voices being heard, even as we interact with organizations who are going to focus on, like, hey, well, what you going to do with that vote? And we have opinions on that too. But I'm just really grateful for this conversation and the ability to talk about what my experience was like getting that vote back, because this is what I dedicate my life to, is the ability for people to engage in democracy. And I wouldn't be doing that if I hadn't lost it.
And I can speak to that sense of passion and energy that FRC has, that Neil and Desmond and Connie, I've heard all of you speak at different times, and I've been moved every time, as just from my heart, just as a citizen. And certainly as someone who spent my adult life litigating for people's civil rights and discrimination cases, it's all about, we're all human and nobody's better than anybody else, and nobody should be treated any differently than anybody else. So much of what you say resonates really powerfully on a personal level. And I can say, as a member of the League, that is a passion that the League members have. We love voters. We want as many voters as possible. We also don't take sides. We're not a left, right, anything. We came out of the effort for women to get the right to vote over 100 years ago. But the thing that people often don't remember or don't know, I learned it myself doing that traveling to Seneca Falls, is many of the initial women suffragettes were abolitionists. They wanted to end slavery. They were so upset about slavery and atrocity before God. They wanted to speak outside of their home. And some of the men folk were like, honey, go back in the kitchen. And that's when they kind of realized, I'm trying to help Black people get a better life, but we are bound. And so that started that energy for the vote. And the League has held on to that passion for voting. And what we've done with that is we worked alongside FRRC, many other groups, to educate people, to get them to sign the petition, to put it on the ballot. And you're right. You would talk to anybody and they would say, most people would say, people need second chances. And you don't get political. You just take it to the heart. You talk it. We've all made mistakes and we've been given a chance. You don't block someone from voting for the rest of their life. So we had our pitch, but it was something that really resonated. And then, like you said, Amendment 4 still has its power because it took away the 150 years of nobody. And it took away the 5 and 7 year wait to even apply for clemency that Governor Scott had put in place. So it's much improved. But there's still work to be done. And I know FRRC is doing its part with education and fines and fees. And I wanted to share what the League is doing. We're educators and we take the time to educate. So what we thought, and actually I was sitting right next to Desmond when I got the idea at one of our meetings, our coalition meetings. And we were talking about how people don't know a lot about registering voters and this and that. And I said, well, the League does education all the time. We should do a training. And he said, yeah, do a training. That was the beginning of the idea of let's create a continuing legal education for lawyers. Once the statute passed that said you could go to court, well, I'm 61, and anybody over, who's finished law school a year or two ago, you could not do this. So lawyers don't even know about this. Even though it's in the law, it's a law nobody knows. So there was a need to educate lawyers. You can help people. So the League created that continuing legal education program, and we have it offered. It's on our website. It's for free. And not everybody has to be a lawyer it's open to anybody. But we went to the Florida bar so that they approved it for 2 hours of continuing legal education, which lawyers are required to have. So what the League is trying to do is sweeten the pot for lawyers. Please take the course. And by the way, there's a lot of people, returning citizens, who could use your help. Would you please consider giving pro bono services, which is free services, to help people? Sometimes all they need is to find their records. Sometimes all they need is to, inform what the records say. I myself have done it several times, and I helped about 12 people personally myself. 3 of those people, Neil, didn't even have felonies, but they didn't know. They were not voting. They didn't know it had been dismissed or pled down or to a misdemeanor or null pros, which means it was dismissed. So just going to, someone with a legal ability to read it, we're able to help. So lawyers out there and volunteers out there, finding the records and reading the records for many of the people is the first step. And sometimes that we found people own $25. Well, most people can pay $25. So there is a way for people to get information and help. So we have a hotline, 407-710-5496. And we have a email address, canivote@lwvfl.org, which lets you know if you contact us, we're going to try to refer you to a trained pro bono, which is free, attorney to walk that journey with you. And I can tell you that many attorneys have been moved to tears to be able to help someone get to that place where they can vote again. Because as you say, it's been making decisions about people you love, about yourself. So we're there with you.
And can I share this as well? You know, Cecilia, you and Desmond was probably, you know, connected together in wavelengths, you know, because we've been able through NFRC, been able to put together a team of volunteers. They said people that's most impacted, some connected to the pain, will want to rush to receive the remedy. You know, how we gonna fix this? So tons of volunteers stepped forward and said, hey, let's create a bank. Desmond's leadership. So the phone bank was created, fines and fees. I'm sorry, the fines and fees department was created. People came out, they wanted to participate, and you know, we put together a team that was able to go and knock doors. Are you registered? Do you have fines and fees? Turn in cards. You know, it's just been a beautiful experience. And that is what kind of like pushes keep fire up under my feet all the time. Is that there are those in our community want to have an experience of what political power look like, what it feels like, to know even on your local level, you can say how your interest is being fulfilled. And when we see this is happening community, city by city, then we will be able to have some final achievement. But I just been like, in our last big push that we had with fines and fees, and when Neil was talking about that story, I could tell you about full-grown men that came to some of our sites in tears and said that they thought it was all over for them. That this was going to be their first time coming home from prison after 20 years of doing their time, that they was able then to go back to the ballot box, to the poll, and participate and feel that they was walking down the valley of what citizenship should feel and look like.
Thank you so much, all, for sharing on that. And we have a few questions from folks on Facebook that we're going to put up on the screen here. So Kieran says, hi, Kieran. Kieran says, while canvassing last election, I met a gentleman who hadn't realized Amendment 4 had passed and there was financial assistance for the fees, but it was too late for him to have registered to participate in the November election. What kind of outreach is going to inform returning citizens?
I can take a crack at that if that's all right. One, I just super grateful for what you said, Cecile and Connie. I mean, oh my gosh, your leadership is awe inspiring. What you do in Tampa and just to be on this thing with you is great. Because I think about this question, right? Is how do you inform returning citizens? So much of that can come from authentic relationship and a commitment to kind of cut through all the clutter and the lack of clarity that we see. So a simple answer is, if somebody's out there and they're a returning citizen, they can go to the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition website, or the easiest thing is call our number, 877-MY-VOTE-0, 877-MY-VOTE-0. You'll get connected to a fellow returning citizen, somebody who's been through some similar experiences and who knows what it's like to kind of, you know, walk through these, what can sometimes be some challenging conversations. But our fines and fees program actually grew out of, kind of like Cecile talked about, the legislature passed the law that they passed. And a bunch of us were saying, hey, you know, there doesn't need to be legislation, but they did it anyway. And included in that legislation was some language that allowed people to have access to the courts. Again, like Cecile said, not everybody's going to have access to the courts. But I'll back up what Connie said as well. You know, when you're the person impacted by the legislation, when you are the returning citizen, like this isn't a political science exercise, right? We get up every day, put our work boots on, roll up our sleeves, and you got to get to work because people's lives are impacted by this stuff. So we immediately began talking to various judicial districts to see how we could get access to the courts. And in that process, it became relatively practical. We began to see and talk to real people who are like, man, I owe $400, I owe $700, I got healthcare costs, my mom's in my house, you know, she took me in after I got back, now she's sick, I can't pay these fines and fees. We started thinking like, wow, what if you could just pay these directly, right? So we talked to all the attorneys, we figured out how to set this thing up right, you know, so that people could come to FRC, you know, give us the pertinent information about what their situation is like. We set up a call center so that people could have interaction. Cecile and the league stepped up huge. I mean, they began this kind of attorney assistance program. You get CLE credits if you're an attorney, and please, the information is flowing there. If you're an attorney, you know somebody's an attorney. Like, that's a huge need for this entire process, is for folks to connect with Cecile. But what happens from the returning citizen perspective is then you start a conversation. And then we work through that process. And we began the fines and fees program in 2019. Right, and this was something that just an extension of love from one person to another person, and the simple but big vision that, you know what, you can actually help somebody access democracy, somebody you don't even know from a different community or different state. And what we saw is that people started donating to the fines and fees fund, and we started paying off people's fines and fees in late 2019, and began to, on a very practical level, develop relationships with all 67 clerks of courts, and we began to find that different clerks had different processes in terms of how they paid people's financial obligations. Some paid their interest, others didn't pay their interest. Some, you know, there was just a variety of different processes, and the only way to go through it was to go through it. You know, so you have people who really love other people, in particular returning citizens, helping returning citizens, who would just work your way through that process. And then we saw, you know, this amazing thing happen late last year, when all of a sudden the appeals court, like, think about it, our own governor, our government, like, decided to say, hey, your voices don't matter. I'm going to take taxpayer dollars, I'm going to fight this federal court decision that just liberated hundreds of thousands of people, and I'm going to take it to the 11th Circuit, and I'm going to appeal that. And then they did, right? And then the 11th Circuit ruled that all these folks can't vote. And I think that was a moment in time where there were people who were angry, people were like sad, people were like, I don't know what to do. And in that process, this little fines and fees program that we kind of set up simply because we're just trying to help people, you know, like, hey, this is a real practical way to help somebody, and if somebody can help in their community, cool. And it became this vehicle that people were like, oh my gosh, you mean I can give a gift of democracy to somebody? And it just took on a life of its own, and it has infused in us a belief that we can, if we just get up every day and we go to events like this and we encourage folks who are listening to help. Like, we can get the 700,000+ people in this state who continue to not be able to vote because they have financial obligations. We can help them cross the line. We can advocate for changes through the legislature. We can advocate for changes through clemency. We can advocate for changes through the court systems, and we can help people wherever we can. But we believe that it's possible to get all 1.4 million people impacted by Amendment 4 cleared, and that the spirit of Amendment 4 can actually live in this state. And in doing so, the people most impacted by these policies, these long-term racial injustices, these long-term criminal justice policies that have created multi-tiered systems in our society, that when all those folks, all the people directly impacted, have their voices back, we can see an entirely different state. And so we know that this is what we're pushing for.
Yeah. I want to jump in here, Neil, because we have another question from Facebook, and it's actually relevant to what you're talking about right now. This one is a little bit tougher question here. It's from John Lear. So his question is, shouldn't a rehabilitated convicted felon want to pay all of her debts accumulated because of his or her choice to break the law?
Well, let me address that a little bit. It's been well established in our state and across the nation through academic studies, just looking at sentencing, that sentencing is not always the same for everybody. There is, and in law enforcement is not the same for everybody. I mean, again, we can look at what happened in January 6th. And if that had been the Black Lives Matter, it would have been a whole different situation. So there is, throughout our nation, there is different treatment for different people. So when you have a lot of people with all these fines and fees, another family that would have resources to hire be a conviction. It would be a plea deal or something. So there's a lot of things that are going on where the least of us, those with the least resources, those who often are most law enforcement focuses on looking for a problem, and that sometimes judges with implicit bias are not even aware, put a heavier penalty. So you have all the disparity, which has been proven. The same offense, if a person looks this way, a lighter sentence. Usually if they're Caucasian. If they're African American, usually a heavier sentence. It's just been on and on. So when you say, okay, this judge gave this particular sentence and you should pay it, many times the whole treatment was unfair. You got double whammy when someone else who looks a little different got much less. So you have to factor all of that in when you say, just pay it. And the other thing is, our state, like I said earlier, we had a process where the judges who sentence people, they know what they're doing. They've been doing it for a while. And if that judge is looking at this person who has finished their incarceration, finished their supervision, probation or parole, and is making a judicial judgment that I should remove this fine and fee off the criminal side and make it civil, who is the legislators to come after the fact and take that away? I mean, a judge made that decision, and now we have a law that says, guess what? Go back to another judge for the same decision. That was already made on the cases with the civil lien. So, are we being efficient here when in many of these cases, a judge had already looked at this person, knew all their details, and made that judicial decision based on all of their experience and knowledge? That's been wiped away with the new statute. But there's a process there that says, hey, you got a civil lien? We don't care. Go back to court again. Take up more judicial time. Find a free lawyer or pay someone to do it and come off your job. Do all of that to do what had already been done. So when you look at the equities or the fairness of what happened with the statute, it's very concerning because, again, fines and fees and punishments have not been meted out equitably across the board. And so you have that bias there. And then when judges made the decision to convert them to civil liens, the effect of the conversion to a civil lien has been removed. And again, we're going back to court to do what the judge had already decided to do. So that's the situation about, is it fair to require someone to pay all their fines and fees to be able to have a fundamental right to vote? I don't think so.
Yeah. I thank you for answering that question, Cecile. And I have another question for y'all regarding registering to vote. We've been talking about, folks registering and the issue with the fines and fees. And as y'all know, here in Florida, unless you meet the voter registration criteria, registering to vote is actually a crime if you don't meet that criteria. Mm-hmm. And so I'm curious about, as organizations who register people to vote, should we be relying on court decisions and encouraging people to register, or how do people know that it is legal for them to register or not?
Let me jump on that one too, and then everybody add on. But with regards to the requirement to pay your fines and fees, that is the law. That before you vote, that's not something we were happy with, that it was changed and amended in that way. But frankly, that is the law. And we went to court and the law remained the same in the end. So what we advise people to do is to try to find their records to see what remains to be done with their fines and fees and financial obligations. If they have any problems with that, they have alternatives. Like Neil said, they have the FRRC that has a whole cadre of trained, loving people who have many times have had a similar experience, who can help them and advise them if they can go into the fines and fees program, or if we have a lot of people who just don't know. And that's where we have our trained lawyers who are free to be able to assist people to just even find out what is it that they need to do. Sometimes it's very small or it's already done, So we advise people to reach out to our referral system. Either I know we get referrals from FRRC2, Neil, or just call us directly. We've got our line and the Can I Vote at lwvfl.org. Just reach out. We have volunteers and we have lawyers who are super excited, really jazzed to try to help people, because voting is such a fundamental right, and that's something that many lawyers want to take joy in helping others to get to that place. So there are things that people can do if they don't know. And I also wanted to say there is another system that a person can ask for an advisory opinion from the Division of Elections. It's on their website. And it's a form, and that's actually something that came from the litigation, Neil. So we got another benefit from the litigation. That didn't exist prior to the litigation and the pressure of bringing out how hard it is for people to find their records, understand their records, and then conflicting records. All of these things are out there for people when they want to find out. And so the state said, oh, okay, we see your problem. So you can ask us, and we will tell you, you present your case to us, we can tell you whether you can vote or not. So there's a process that doesn't require going to court. It's not well known because, again, it didn't exist. It wasn't in the legislation. It wasn't in Amendment 4 itself. It's something that the state came up with in response to the litigation. But it is there, and it is an opportunity for people to get the state to tell them what they need to do or whether they can vote. So it's work, and it's not an immediate answer necessarily, but there are pathways for people to get that help.
Awesome. Thank you so much for answering that for us, Cecile. And our next question for the evening is, what can we anticipate is coming up in the fight for voting rights restoration? What's happening right now, or how can folks be involved?
Well, right now, one of the things that we're doing is, say, from an organizer perspective, is that we're making constant phone calls. We are in constant engagement inside the community, building relationship with other organizations. And you know what? Every day we are instilling courage in our community, never telling them to do anything illegal, but we are saying that you have a right to know. And so we have a right to challenge. We have a right to make these challenges, because coming out of all that we've seen and all of the disparities that have been laid out, America, for me, is in a tailspin. And the question has to be asked at this point, is democracy for everyone? And we believe it is. And so for those that we can register, we will register. Those attorneys that want to come to the table, we say welcome. But we're going to just keep on accelerating, because we can't go back. One of the greatest authors, and I'm going to say this because I just love James Baldwin. And he said it was not the wickedness of people that would destroy this country, but it would be based on the spinelessness. Those that know better supposed to do better. And so we can't allow our people to legally be caught up in a catch-22 or I got them, that we expect our supervising elections officers to step forward, the clerks of the courts to step forward, and anybody who want to be on the right side of history to do the right thing. That we can't let this thing called democracy just be controlled by a few. That if America is going to be America, it has to open itself up so all can benefit. So we just going to keep on challenging. We're going to keep on doing the work. We're going to keep on registering people. And once we find individuals that have those little snags, we're going to fight like hell to make sure we untangle that so they can participate in full democracy.
Man, I'll follow you anywhere, Connie. I'm ready to go to war. I'm ready. Tell me where to go. I'm with you. I feel like it's important to keep in context, like when people are talking about uh, the ongoing fight, right? Like sometimes I think, I know myself, so I think about terms like, hey, get a bill passed or get a regulation passed. Well, the truth is Amendment 4 passed, right? And in this state right now, if you look at the numbers, right, there are about 200,000 returning citizens who are currently on the registered to vote. 100,000+ of those folks got their voting rights restored through clemency in the decades before the passage of Amendment 4. And almost 100,000 have registered to vote since the passage of Amendment 4. So that means there's still 1.3 million returning citizens who live in our communities, who come to go to school with us or work with us, go to church or synagogue or to the mosque with us. And they're doing life together with us, and that person can use individual help, and that's how mass movements can have real impact. What we learned over the last 2 years is we made some mistakes. We jumped in the field. We're trying to figure out, like, hey, what's the best way to help somebody get registered to vote, or what's, maybe we can do it this way or that way. What we found, at least from our organizational perspective, was returning citizens talking to returning citizens in people's communities is the best way to tear down the walls to do voter registration. I would always tell groups who I love and we're engaged in serious work together, please don't knock on my door and be like, hey, I understand you're a felon. I want to vote. I want to register you to vote. I'm like, who are you? I'm going to go vote against you, because that's not actually the way that you want to interact with people. So I think that there is this idea that like there are 1 million+ people who still have not registered, and hundreds of thousands of them are eligible right now. So we got work to do in the community, and we can get out and we can do the blocking and tackling associated with voter registration work. I think from what Cecile was saying is that there is a process in place to help people get to where they can register to vote. The truth is our government is no way equipped right now to give full clarity to every single returning citizen possible. But I would encourage folks, like, honor and give the due to the returning citizen who's walking through this process. Most of us know our situation better than anybody else, right? And so for me to make a good faith effort that I can, that I meet the requirements, then I'm the one who can know that. We don't necessarily have to overthink what the returning citizen is going through, because I've talked to too many people who got their voting rights restored through the clemency process, a process that does not require you to pay your fines and fees. And they had local government officials trying to tell them they had to pay their fines and fees. So while it is complicated, I do think it's like, let's put the basic building blocks in place first. Let the returning citizen be the main spoke in the conversation around this process. And many of us know when we're able to, and many of us know when we got to call Cecile and that crew of attorneys who are able to allow us to walk through this process. Because I have some questions about my specific circumstances. And in doing that, we can make a lot of progress, because we believe we can look at what happened last cycle with all the mistakes and challenges we made, and we don't believe they're mistakes, they're learning opportunities. So we learned in that process. We think that collectively we should be able to wildly expand the electorate based on what we were able to do just in this last cycle and what we've learned in the process. So we encourage anybody to get plugged in, call FRC, and I think in particular right here, right now, reach out to the league. Because of this attorney assistance program is wildly important to us, because the court system is still relatively is a territory that we haven't necessarily fully gotten into. I can say that if you go down to like the judicial district in Miami-Dade, almost 1,000 returning citizens had their voting rights restored through the judicial process of a modification program. And so it showed us that by getting people in front of the courts, and I agree with Cecile, and I'll always say it, not everybody has access to the courts, right? But if we can flood the zone in our local communities with whatever tools that we have and the love that we have for our neighbors, we can help returning citizens get into the courts. We can help returning citizens get their fines and fees paid. We can help returning citizens get through the clemency process. We can push our elected officials to change policies where needed. But when we do it all together, last year was a success from our perspective, because a stadium full of returning citizens who couldn't even vote 2 years before voted. But that's just the beginning. And so we want to encourage people to get plugged in and get moving. And Bernice, can I say one thing to that person who asked a question about fines and fees? Mm-hmm. Right? I embrace those kind of questions. I believe that like one of our challenges in the public space is that we don't allow for diversity of thought, and we don't allow for, real conflict to happen. I appreciate that question. I'm assuming it comes from somebody who, wants what's best in their community, right? Because I think all of us go to bed at night. None of us want to have any crime happening in our communities. And we should be real about that process that somebody goes through. When I broke, when I hurt my community, right, restoration was necessary on a lot of levels. So for me, of course, I wanted to help in the restoration process, including with the financial obligations that I own. I just don't know that the right question is whether the person wants to do that or not, as much as whether they can or not. Because I think that what we've seen in the court decisions, especially in the Hinkle case, was that 600,000-700,000 people were using public defenders. They clearly showed that they had no ability to pay any fines and fees. And so what we're doing is creating a two-tiered system around a fundamental right, democracy, our voice in our community, that literally hangs in the balance based on how much you make or don't make. And so while I'm cool with the guy's question or the lady's question, and I can connect with that on a certain level because I believe in restoration, and I think that people who are able to reintegrate in the community can make great neighbors and help create safer communities. And so we should talk about what it means and what your mindset's like when you get off community supervision or you come out of incarceration. But what I think is really important is when you understand how systems work. And we have a system in the state of Florida that creates a dynamic in which poor people are not able to vote right now, while somebody who went through the exact same system, somebody like I had means to money, so hey, some white dude with some cash was able to work and pay off his stuff. Well, there's other people who might not be able to do that. And I think that we have to be able to talk about that too. And that involves being able to address a question like that just head on without thinking that, that came from a bad place. I'm hoping that that person actually just wants to live like anybody else.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. And we have a question from Facebook I want to bring up. This question's from Nancy Weiss. Nancy asks, what can ordinary citizens do to help returning citizens? Are there any ongoing fundraising campaigns for the public to donate to help pay fines and fees?
Yeah, I'd love to jump into that. Nancy, thank you for that. That was a great question. And for organizations like ours who know that resources matter, all of us live in the real world, right? Whereas in order to pay for somebody's fines and fees, somebody else has got to be able to say, I want to help that. You go to the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition website, there's our fines and fees program. Nancy is right there. There's an opportunity to either sign up because you're a returning citizen who wants some help, or for somebody to donate to that program. That program has not stopped. We are continuing to operate that. Started right after the passage of 766, which was the implementation bill of Amendment 4, and we're just continuing to go on with that. I would say one thing that we're learning that there's real power in paying off people's fines and fees is when you think about it, the process of reintegrating into the community. We're seeing that hundreds of people who were able to get access to democracy through the fines and fees program are also able to get their driver's licenses restored, because we have incentives in this state that aren't really set up right. We take people's driver's licenses away because they can't pay their financial obligations, and then they lose jobs, lose contact with families, and then we wonder why they get pulled back into a system that creates an environment that can be harmful for everybody involved. So what we're seeing is that returning citizens at our core, as a returning citizen, our hope, our dream is that we can rally with people who believe in this idea that when our sentences are completed, we should be treated just like anybody else, right? No new wage law that treats returning citizens in a way that you don't get paid minimum wage. We don't need we're not asking for special bunch of anything. Our hope is that to rally around this simple idea that, hey, when completed your sentence, you're just like anybody else. And so that paying off those fines and fees is huge, because in a very tangible way, when you're trying to re-enter the community and you owe thousands of dollars, you can't get access to credit, you can't get access to an apartment because that you can't get, like, it puts this, you know, anchor on around you that's just going to drag you down at exactly the moment you most want to succeed and you most want to reconnect with your family and your community and live out these dreams that have been put on hold because of the consequences of, well, a whole lot of things. But I just share that with you, Nancy, that if that's something that you're thinking about doing, that fines and fees program is a life-changing opportunity to get involved in this movement. And I appreciate you asking the question.
I'm going to move us into our last question of the evening. So thank you all again for being just incredible panelists. This one is for Cecile, but of course, feel free to jump in afterwards as well. For organizations like the organizations who sponsored the event tonight, what are some ways that we can come together to support returning citizens? Is there a central info hub that we can be supporting?
That's a really, really great question. I think what the league is trying to do is trying to seed the community with information about what we're doing at the league. And also one of our business cards I work with Jessica Younts, my good friend. We worked on it on the back of it's a league on one side and it's FRRC on the other, because we just want to look, help will help you, they'll help you, get help. You know, if you have questions, get support. So I think if we all work together and put out information about what each other is doing, that's a big part of it. The league has created some posters. I'm going to go and grab one and show you. But we've created some posters that we're sending out into the reentry programs that were just mailed out today. And so we are using resources. When we get grant money, that's the first thing we do is try to put it right back out into the community. So we've got voter registration information. We have instructions. We have, if you need any questions or help, please call us. We have the business card that mentions FRRC. It's also on our poster, because working together and consistently, we're going to be able to put our arms around it. So we recognize that, again, this is a relatively new change after 150 years. So it's not surprising that everybody doesn't know about it. So we're trying to work with public defenders. We're trying to work with state attorneys. We're trying to work with FRRC. We're just trying to put the little signposts out so people know where they can go. And I think if we all do that for each other, then the word is going to get out more. You know, and like I said, the league and the FRC has been working together for many, many years. But I think there are ways that we can work together maybe more consistently and more efficiently. And we're working on that right now to try to do that. But that's what we do. We advertise what we're bringing to the table, and we, like that little business card, you flip it over, it says one thing. It says this is the league information, and you flip it over, it has that 1-800 number that Neil mentioned. So just sharing knowledge, packaging, going to where people who need that information are, like the reentry programs is a good one, because many of them are just starting out trying to educate people. And so the league is trying to give them tools. We call it a voting toolkit for them to take on that responsibility. And if they have questions, they can come back to us. And again, we send the business cards with FRRC, so that most people have heard of FRRC, but we let them know, you know, just here, give the business card out, because it gives the returning citizen, because it's their decision to reach out to, it gives them an opportunity to look and try both and see which one is most able to help.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for being here tonight. I wish we were in person so we could give like a round of applause for everybody, but COVID, so there's no applause, even though it's well-deserved for each of you. I want to also thank Everyone who joined us on Facebook Live, we really appreciated your questions, and they made the discussion very rich. So thank you again for participating. And as Dr. King once famously paraphrased, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. So I encourage all of you to get involved with great organizations in the community like FRRC, like League of Women Voters, For Future, Dream Defenders, or Care Florida. And there's so many others. Get involved and help us bend. The struggle towards justice continues. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you for the opportunity.